are coming out of recess from our meeting two from June, what was that, 11th?
11.
Yeah, June 11th, particularly to discuss more the fee schedule that was part of business items 8B. Did we have anything else that we need to discuss as part of this coming out of recess, or are we good with the fee schedule?
The addition of the incentive agreement being placed on the July 9th agenda,
Okay.
meeting number 2, and it does not require a public hearing. It's just for changes that are not material, but it does need to be on the agenda.
All right, so do we need an official vote for that, or do we just put it on the agenda and get to it in July?
I think you can instruct it to be put on the agenda as an agenda item. Well, there's not a public hearing being called.
Fantastic. We'll get that on the agenda for July and get that out of the way. And we'll go into this fee schedule conversation. So, if we could get a copy of the current fee schedule that we are operating under, and that I assume we will continue to operate under at least until December of this year?
So, you know, the honest answer would be, we will start this fee schedule July 1st.
Mhm.
But what is already open goes under that current schedule.
Okay.
So all fall sports will go under that schedule. And we don't have anything else to us, but the fee schedule as a whole will start on July 1st.
Okay, very good. Now, the contention and the concerns are around the athletic program fees. And do we have a readily accessible copy of the recommended athletic fees as well to put up there? So recommended versus what we had was not separating in-town versus out-of-town participants for the athletic programs. And then a fee schedule that was simplified to $75 for the majority of the sports, and then $120 for cheerleading and football.
In the meeting last week, this one just didn't take note of that, I guess. T-ball was changed to $40, and all 6U sports was changed.
Okay.
We added that in, but I guess that probably was not on the link.
So we did get to that piece of discussion and kind of landed very simply leaving 6U sports and T-ball at $40. So with that being said, let's go back to talking about the numbers that are involved with these considerations for the fee schedule. And then let's go back and also get a consensus on what we want to do with in-town versus out-of-town residents. So the breakdown of numbers that I gave everybody, I believe at the 11th meeting, was that if you have a team that has 10 players playing 10 games, having 10 practices, of course with your referees and your outfits and your part-time staff included as well, the cost for that entire team, if we were doing the minimum we could possibly do with referees, was going to be $750 that we would have to expend to put on that sport of 10 individuals. So that's how we got to that $75 per child number. And then we still are also considering and leaning toward coaches. For every team you coach, you also can get one child free playing that sport. So that would take away from that total number that you would be bringing in as income for the expenditures you're making to play that sport for a team. Now, it is my understanding, for the most part, council, we are interested in going back to some type of in-town, out-of-town model.
I am.
Yeah,
I am too.
yeah. Okay.
We just want to make sure, if I can interrupt,
Yes, yes.
that we can make sure Parks and Rec sports can pay for itself without including taxes in order to get this done.
All right. And
Yeah, I'm just thinking it's optic because if I'm a resident of Selma, taxpayer of Selma, then you say if somebody out of town get the same benefit I get for being in it, though. It's just idea, for me, it's like everything, like I said, we pay double taxes in Title VII, but people in the country pay just one kind of taxes. I don't know, it's just idea of getting, need that distinction where, if you're in the town of Selma, like we are the Selma Town Council, we should always say Selma is the top priority, but, with everything we do.
So, in the audience, preferences over in town versus out of town, how do we feel? Would we like to see a separation? Yes. Yes. Mr. Lamons?
Personally, I don't.
Okay.
Yes, I like to see it, but then after the last meeting, there was some discussion about, they haven't been charging them in town out versus out of town. Some of the Parks and Rec staff weren't even aware of what would be out of town versus in town. Well, then I'm like, well, if that's gonna cause more of an issue, yes, I think it looks better, and I think that as a town member, I like it that way, but I also don't want it to cost us more money to get to a point where we can do it. Like, I guess in my mind, can't the software or rec desk, when you put in your address or something, know whether it's in town versus out of town versus depending on somebody to know whether they should be in town versus out of town?
The unfortunate part is we did have that set up properly in Rec Desk, and staff made the mistake of overriding that feature because they just were sure that if it said Selma, North Carolina, you're in town. So they overrode it, and that's how.
Yeah, and I didn't know that before. I'm like, well, if the software can't do it, we don't want the extra expense of trying to program the software so that it does do it. But if it can do it, then I prefer to have it out of town. I don't know that it has to be quite a significant difference because out of town rates are like double what in town rates are. But even just for me, sometimes just that $10 discount because I live in town is
Yes, ma'am.
To expand on what I was saying, the reality is taxes are supposed to not be paying for this. So the relevance of tax versus not tax to the town isn't relevant to these kids' play. Because we're supposed to be funding this all from what we're getting from the teams. So why would their tax location be different? Join the team. We're trying to actually build programs, which means we need more kids. If we have out-of-town prices that are high, we're not gonna get those kids. They're gonna go to another town. But if they play with us, our program needs to get better and better and better and better, which is better for the kids that their parents are.
And I mentioned taxes because it's been mentioned to me by the rest.
Of course, and but the thing is that we're trying desperately on the board to get this stuff to be self-sustaining. Because it should not come from tax, it should be self-sustaining. Part of that being,
So I think you just have to look at the towns around us, and if you look at them, see their fees are small. They do use taxes. That's why theirs are small.
Well, and to your point, not necessarily having that chasm between the numbers, but just that understanding that, hey, we acknowledge you're in town, let's give you a little break. And talking about our neighbors as well, Pine Level is a pretty simple example. Their in-town rate is $65, their out-of-town rate is $85. And I think as far as from a financial standpoint, that has worked for them. And with that being said, everybody else's out-of-town rate seems to run about that same line. So we might not suffer having too many kids jumping ship to other communities because no matter what, that out-of-town rate is going to be the same across. Are we comfortable with that 65, 85 number in Pine Level?
And to me, it goes back to looking at those numbers. You go back to the last 5, 6, 7 years. What are our numbers? Is it a significant amount that we need to have, or is it
Let's bring that up.
irrelevant? I mean, do we even need to have the conversation? If it's irrelevant, we have 27 kids from out of town.
So it depends on a little bit of the sport, obviously, it's like it's a bit different. These are, the most current seasons that we pool. But indoor soccer, definitely you can see is our highest, and what's that, a little better than a quarter for kids and non-residents, just for round numbers. Baseball might be lower than half, or non-residents, so it does depend a little bit on the sport. I can tell you from this year's T-ball that I was involved with, I think we had 4 out of 13 that were out of town. So, and, you know, they were from Princeton, which, yes, good little ride, so they wanted to be in South.
Now, I'll tell you, a part of the concern that we discussed earlier, I know with that 120 resident number, particularly for indoor soccer, some of the folks that you would think were in town were technically out of town.
Those numbers are probably skewed.
So those numbers are probably skewed a little bit. I mean, I can think of 10 kids off the top of my head with indoor soccer that technically do not live in our town limits that would be affected by the in-town, out-of-town rate.
And to answer this question, we have addressed, that issue. And we have tightened up how you do it and who can do it. And we've taken away the walk-ins. If there's basically 2 ways you do it, online rec desk, or you can go to customer service and they'll register for you and they understand how to verify. Yeah. So cheap.
So from a numbers standpoint, I think particularly with us landing at 65 and 85, financially, those numbers will work out and still give us about the same amount of revenue based on what we expect to see for signups going forward. The only thing that will probably remotely hobble us when it comes to financially not meeting that revenue versus expense is the addition of the free child per coach, because that'll take out a decent chunk of revenue per team, quite frankly.
Mayor, I would suggest, this question, that's not correct, make sure it's correct, but I would suggest that we add that statement in there, verify, is it all coaches or head coach? Understand head coach, that's so far. Talk to them, might be more coaches.
Well,
Our assistants and such as that.
yeah.
So I like to understand how you're gonna pick the coach.
Well, honestly, you know, in most sports, it's typically volunteers, you need a lot of coaches, and I think,
Or
I think the mayor coached 3 soccer teams at one time this year.
I understand that, but now you're saying if your coach, kid is free.
Mhm.
So that's gonna throw another curve in there.
And a lot of folks will come out the woodworks.
Yes.
Trying to coach.
Yeah.
I would say that part of that, and a very good point the rec board brought up previously, is having a mandatory preseason meeting for anybody interested in being a coach. And then we discern, we as a staff and even Parks and Rec board can probably lean into this conversation saying, hey, with the amount of interest we've had, we will have this many teams for this sport. And these folks are going to be coaching for this sport, and then have them sign some documentation saying, we understand we're coaching, we're going to have to show up, we are responsible for this many practices, this many games. And I think that'll actually get us a better product at the end of the day, to be honest. So I think if we take the hard line on, if you're trying to get this discount, there's some hoops you're going to have to jump through to make sure that you're on the up and up with doing this, I think it'll work out well.
If you're the head coach, you're the head coach and you're responsible for your team.
Right. I think assistant coach, I don't think we extend that. I do not think we extend that to an assistant coach.
That is well understood.
I think we only extend that to a head coach, and then, you know, assistant coaches, of course, then they have the leeway of if they need to bow out for something, of course they can, but a head coach has to understand that they have to be there. Does that sound okay to everybody?
Now, the 65 and the 85, that's everything but T-ball?
That would be, so football and cheerleading would not be that.
If you look at that, I would say,
Okay.
you know, we really, you know, have to, we'd be giving away football.
Right, because
Just the basics.
your football is that's gonna cost a little more, and cheerleading would be for lack of a better way of saying it, is a costume.
Yeah, the only,
And the
I would say
costume's
the
gonna
difference
cost.
in football and cheer would be the safety.
Mhm.
Occasionally, not every kid, but, you know, that part doesn't come into play, but the uniform are about the same.
In-town versus out-of-town football.
So up until these last four years or so, we always took a fee in for football coming through the gate.
We did.
We did.
'Cause I was
I
there.
went to 2 games, I paid both,
Uh-huh.
in here,
Yeah.
so, and I actually.
We did.
So, we did.
Okay.
And there's also concessions. Now, you cannot rely on concessions. You can't even rely on the cost to get in. However-
Concessions make a lot of money.
I stood there and sold and sold and sold. I couldn't believe how many cans of soda and candy, the little lollipops. It was incredible how much we sold. But again, you can't rely on that. You've got to start out with what you can. And, you know, I was thinking even if you took last year's rates, moved them over to the non-resident, you'd have football and cheerleading covered. And then if you raised our rates, which 65 would be good, but keep football and cheerleading's got to stay up there, in my opinion.
So I don't miss anything, let's do this, you do have it, so we can update this.
Mhm.
Let's go through resident, and tell me where you want. And then make sure before you vote, that what you're voting on is football.
Absolutely.
So baseball, where you,
So
in red, we're talking resident.
resident 65 is baseball. Basketball 65.
Mm-hmm.
Cheerleading resident. So $85 for a uniform, but you don't have any reffing considerations or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, really, we buy them pom-poms, and, you know, they don't last, you know, so, but they're not crazy expensive. You figure, you think about that price, and this thing is PlayStation, but that's really about the only other expense.
So if we made that, well, I'd say honestly, make it 100, but also make sure we're using them for multiple sports throughout the year.
That's what I've got, 100.
Yeah, 100, and then make sure, because at least football and basketball, they should be cheering. Yes, ma'am.
Just say that, are you saying that when you sign up for cheerleading, you're signing up to cheer for football and basketball? Or are you saying there's two cheerleading programs, one for football and one for basketball?
No, you're starting to cheer for both football and basketball under one registration.
And how is that, that was the question I was gonna ask, is that other places do that?
Yes, ma'am. So do you like that idea?
That is how other ones do.
I think that's great.
They'd have their costume, they'd have their pom-poms.
Yeah, and at, on level, when they play basketball, they have cheerleaders even.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think I was just looking at it yesterday, and it was when you sign up for cheerleading. It was, like, they also do like fundraising for all their sports except for cheerleading. All the things were free. And cheerleading was more expensive, but it was cheaper than if you played two sports. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So are we comfortable with 100 for resident?
Mm-hmm.
For cheerleading. Anyway, so we're still sticking on the resident line. 65 for soccer, resident.
What about
So we're
out of,
sticking on football.
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped football. I apologize.
what about cheerleading, the out of town?
We'll stick with the resident line right
Oh,
now.
okay, I'm writing 85 and 85.
So the football, we had proposed 120 for in town. So let's look at
Yeah.
the cost for football again.
That's what we did. which we did.
Right. Let's look at the cost one more time for football.
$85 for the uniform.
Mhm.
We do have refs.
Yep.
Referees. It may be three. Yeah, maybe.
Three. It requires three. Three.
Then you have to have the chain tracker.
Yeah.
They're usually, we usually don't pay for just for referees. We actually, I will say we do get a lot of volunteers.
Yeah.
And let's be
Yeah, with refs,
let's be honest though, we should also be changing out some of those pieces of equipment a little more than we do, particularly those little ear protectors and things like that. That more often should be a yearly thing versus the rate that we had been doing. So I'd say 120 is good for that in-town number. Correct.
And if you're looking at this, I think we really need to step back and look. I mean, I've done quite a bit of looking around, and I think what we're paying for uniform costs is
Too high.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that after we got
way too
by
high.
the prices.
so I will tell you, I will say this, as far as where we have been headed the past year and a half. We've been asked to have premier sports. And one thing we heard from a lot of parents is better uniforms. And, in football and in baseball, we stepped up our game in uniforms. And I can tell you, we had a lot of questions like, brother, sounds like, they look much better. And, the hope is, that will bring me. So we are, the football team designed their uniform last year. They got, that $85, it was a jersey, the breeches, socks, and a bag with their number. And I'm gonna tell you, they look like a little NFL team out there. Play like them.
Well, I guess from my perspective, looking at that, and baseball uniform costs $37, baseball is the shirt and the hat, and you're saying that's only $2 more than what it costs for the indoor soccer shirt or the basketball soccer shirt. I'm struggling to see that, or the basketball shirt is $3, so they're more than baseball stuff.
Well, I'll tell you why the basketball and the soccer, particularly uniforms we traditionally wear, they have multiple layers of material. So you had a yellow layer of material, and then you had a white layer of material that was sewn in the middle. Whereas traditionally the baseball shirts were usually just one kind of plain T-shirt with the number on the back. And then with your basketball jerseys, they have several different, they have a border stitched in them, and then they have a separate color stitched in the shoulders as well to make it look more like a well-dressed basketball team. I think we have traditionally kept the baseball, softball, t-ball shirts a little bit simpler.
This year was different.
But they stepped up a
This
little.
year we went to, what they call Subline, and, they looked good, and they were like 20 some odd dollars for.
Were they still one piece though, or was it?
Oh, yeah, there was still one
Yeah,
piece, there was just one, silky type shirt, and the hat was like $9 or something like that, so I think it was like. Now, I'll tell you, the other things we played, they had old basic t-shirt, I mean, no different than, what Jefferson got in the winter, just a basic t-shirt. But everybody loved where you get it from, looked good.
That art department, they're gonna charge you every time they lay that one color down and they put a nut, they're gonna charge you.
Yeah, and layers and things, but it was still, and I'm not gonna lie, I think about baseball, I was putting in a baseball uniform from when I was coaching at the other TNU team. I got sponsorships and got different uniforms, but, I guess stick with the uniform, like, do we use like the same, do we have a bid process that bid, where we bid them out, like the whole year? And I'm just thinking, okay, if a company knows I'm gonna have this work over the next several months or whatever, sometimes if we're giving them a year contract, they know and they can order and higher volumes to be able to get lower prices. So I just had questions about how the whole uniform cost thing was working
far as baseball, that's the only one I was involved with. We have been using the same vendor for a long time, out of Clayton, and, I think Ms. Leanne, she took over that this year. She did a lot of pricing. But the thing we found out, these sublines were like crazy high through them, and we found out where they're from, but they're not making, we actually were never gonna be California.
Yeah.
And it surprised everybody that we got a machine to be. They were actually.
With the boxes where it's like they're ordering the transfers, and I'm seeing the increases in it, and I'm like, I wonder if they're, if they have some accounts where they're getting the shirts, I don't think it would be cost effective, especially when you look at 120, 150, and soccer kids are more cost effective. But, you know, for some stores, I can't believe they're doing that, because they can't be cost effective. But it just had me wondering, how are we getting our proposal, our uniform costs, if there any way to get them cheaper, if we're promising them a year's worth of this many uniforms potentially.
I think maybe after, between last year, this year, and next year, if we can guarantee that we have a steady number of kids signing up, because I'll tell you, 3 years ago, our numbers were way down. You gotta bear in mind, that's when we were still charging $25 for a sport. I think we only bought in $5,000 in revenue off of sports 3 years ago. So I don't think we would be at a place really to say we can guarantee you this number until we really see some consistency in our signups. Mr. Hamilton?
Factoring in the cost of basketballs, baseballs, footballs, catcher's equipment.
No, we are kind of trying to take it easy on that piece right now and really look at the help that we're getting with sponsorships, B, understanding that still tax dollars are going to subsidize a little bit of this. So no, we aren't factoring those numbers in at all. No, we're just sticking with the uniforms, refs, and part-time staff. So with that being said, I do think it is wise for us to look into that. I don't think it would really change the numbers that we're talking about right now, because we're still probably taking a little bit of a hit when it comes to these numbers and actually funding the programs by itself. So we were talking about football. We landed at 120 with football. Everybody comfortable there? What was the next one?
Soccer.
65. I think, and then softball, 65, and then of course the T-ball is 40. And then we need to still say 6U sports as well, however we need to differentiate there.
Yeah, also have, we've added volleyball, I don't know, got time this year, but we've never done it before, we don't have to prepare for, like, they have like this, volleyball prayer.
Knee pads for volleyball, does that come as part of equipment uniform? The kids have to get those
So
themselves.
we're talking about jersey and
Just okay. So that would still, how many referees? Just one referee.
We usually ask for one from each team.
Okay. So would 60? I guess the 65 would still fall in line there. Does that?
It's been around 80 and over.
Let's stick with 65.
all right, let's go to, we've added a 6U, I know that's not like this, we've added the next line with the 6U sports throughout.
$40, and that's resident.
Yes, sir. So let's look at non-resident, start back with baseball.
So baseball, we were saying 85 for non-resident. Basketball,
Pretty much the same.
85, same deal. The cheerleading, so that, would we just say bump everything up $20?
Sounds like consistent.
So 120 for cheerleading, 140 for football, 85 for soccer, 85 for softball, 60 for t-ball, and then 60 for 6U sports all total. So,
And volleyball, 85.
and volleyball would be 85, thank you.
And I'll add a line, head coach.
per team they're coaching. So one free child per team you're coaching. So if you're coaching 3 teams, you can get 3 free kids in that are yours. Have to be your kids though.
Smash one more person that's not on here. But we're talking, I think y'all mentioned a multi-sport discount. You know, I guess the 2 questions would be, what is a number and what is a discount? Or if that's what you wanna do.
That's tough.
Now's the time.
I don't know.
Just tell me how you gonna,
Now, we don't have to do that tonight.
I know,
We could add that in another fee schedule, but I know that's something that we want to do. I think everybody is in agreement with one of the how we do it.
I would,
I wanted to make sure that if they're signing up for 3 sports, they have to sign up for all 3 of them at the same time. And you have to pay for
Well,
them,
yeah, what you,
cause you know, I can,
so that's the discussion. I can
so
say,
what I would say is let's toss that to rec board to really put their
maybe
heads
about
together.
recommendation.
Yeah, we probably need a solid recommendation and some serious thought
Couple
around
more
it.
small members.
Yeah.
you see what I'm saying there? You-
Because,
The discussion we
yeah,
had
I see that too.
Was, you know, also 3 sports and also multiple. I understand the point that to say, you know, they, there's maybe 3 or 4 kids that could be playing, you know, 2 sports. Anybody would, you know, like, kids that, you know, maybe 3 kids are playing soccer in 3 different age groups. Would that be, so we'll bring something back to that.
Yeah, I'm not,
Just gonna keep up.
well, and I was about to say, because Councilman Whitley makes an excellent point, we do need to make sure that we don't make it too complicated.
Right.
So there needs to be some type of family program that is very basic, that when we're talking about the multiple kids playing, say, sports year round, and then maybe a 3-sport discount somewhere in there as well. But if we start putting in every little scenario that we can figure out, we're gonna get in trouble.
Otherwise, you're gonna come up at the end, it's gonna get convoluted, and then you're gonna have to go back through your records, and then you would have to issue a refund at
Oh,
the end of the fiscal sports year, I guess.
I would suggest that if we do something family membership oriented, that it's something that they pay over the course of 12 months each month. I don't know how you would handle a multi-sport type discount, but I'd say again, if you're gonna do a family membership, make sure it's something they're paying through the whole month so that they don't have to worry about, they can do it as far as budgeting, and we don't have to keep up with it as far as signing them up for sports. But otherwise, I'd leave it to Parks and Rec to consider carefully.
We just need to think through it, because when you throw in the application that you throw in a scholarship, that parent still has to sign up that child on rec desk. How do they know, well, do we have anything on rec desk that will allow them to bypass the fee schedule or to show in or somehow, and does that child count towards the family discount? Does that child count towards the multi-sport discount? I mean,
I would say that if a child is being sponsored, we cannot do the discount related to it, because I think that would get incredibly hairy very quickly. So if a child's being sponsored by somebody, a good citizen is saying, we'll take care of a child for a sport, do not include them in any of the memberships or discounts. But otherwise, I think Rec Desk can handle plugging those pieces in if there is sponsorship related. But we'll leave that to the Parks and Rec Board, Parks Over staff. Please, for the next Parks and Rec Board meetings, have a abundance of information of our capabilities. So we've got the basic sports fee schedule out of the way. That would still not take effect in the fall sports, correct?
No, this would be, I mean, the next time we're gonna open anything is winter sports, which would open, I guess,
Ms. Bundy had an excellent point. It seems that as we refer to fall and winter sports, it doesn't seem to adequately cover actually how our sports are run. Yeah. So just from, quite frankly, a marketing standpoint, some consideration on Are we having 3 sports seasons, 3 sports banquets, that type of thing? Because it seems like that winter into spring run is very long. And as we saw when we were trying to plan banquets previously, that was a lot of kids.
Council, just one more question and I'll leave you alone. You know, if the rec board would recommend, additional sports, because there's been some chatter about a couple different leagues, would I be safe in saying that this 65 is about where y'all wanna be? Unless it's something extremely, or would y'all like to redo the fee schedule if we say, you know, some adult leagues, we've been talking about the flag football league, or would you like a recommendation from the board? Where did it be?
I would say let's bring it to the board. How do we feel, board? Is that okay? If we have sports that want to be added in, let's make sure we run it through the board first. But I would say that if you're talking about a sport like lacrosse that deals with a helmet, you're on the football side.
Football side, flag
you-
football, I think would be more the cheaper side.
That's right.
Yes, so, just wanna make sure we're, get your wishes out there.
I think the more sports, the merrier. Just if we think it's feasible for our community, let's do
I
it.
think we got all are in agreement, we live to try to push on some adult leagues, that's popular in the past, in other towns, they've their work.
But again, Mr. Hamilton brought up a fantastic point back there, that this conversation does not even begin to touch on basic things like basketballs, footballs, maintenance of rims, things like that.
Lights on the ball.
Lights,
Good
nothing.
Lord.
So we're still trying to be very courteous to our population as far as these prices are concerned, but make it reasonable from a financial standpoint. Any other, yes, sir?
Do we have a hardship program in place for all the people that can't? Do they have an application where they can fill out a hardship application?
We will produce one, and that was the conversation we were having about sponsorship. We've already had people speak up and say we would like to sponsor kids to play sports. So to receive that sponsorship, they would need to put in an application to make sure that they would qualify. Absolutely, yes, sir.
We're working on it.
Yes, sir, we are working on that. Thank you. Anything else we need to touch on?
And I understand what you're saying, I'll say one last thing. I do agree the uniforms did really well. But as we increase the prices, I just want us to keep in mind, does it count more to have your kid look like he plays in the NBA, MLB, or is it better for you to have 2 or 3 kids in your family actually play? Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about another $25 added on, take that 25 twice. Now I've got 2 kids that can play, and do I want to make my kid look? And I mean, you pull back up. I have purchased a ton of jerseys. $40 for a basketball jersey, the numbers that we're buying, we've got to be able to get these cheaper somewhere else. I don't care if it's Shoe Line or whoever. I can almost buy an NBA logo style jersey rated at that price. And so, I mean, we do need, I mean, those prices are, you start, I mean, we shouldn't be paying more than $20, $25 for baseball. You know, that's $10, $12.
That is exactly what we're paying.
You know,
37 is the hat and everything to go with it.
but I'm saying we should be at 25, probably or more. I mean, we should be saving, you know, we should be paying 25 maybe for a basketball jersey. That's just what I feel, that if we were to sit there and.
The only thing I can speak to is baseball, but that's not what I was.
And I'm just saying, just to go back one last time, I think next year we do need to, or even this year, or as we move forward. I know some of these uniforms were purchased or ordered last minute.
Yeah.
God, it costs us. That there is no doubt in my mind, because I've been involved in this for 3 years. I don't remember any time that we did anything timely in ordering some of these jerseys. So they're always been last minute, and this price to me reflects.
Some people may not like what I'm gonna say, but that's why we had turnover in staff, is those problems.
Yeah.
And that's
Yes, sir.
right, and I'm saying is that as we build and move forward, hopefully this price will drop, come down, and we can do a much better job of getting these uniform costs in line so that we can reflect that on.
And Don, I'll say this, we offered, you know, obviously, you get a restoration, the kid gets a jersey. We offered our shirts, to parents at $25, cause they, I think they were like 23. And I bet grandma's bought them for the other kid they ain't playing, not the first complaint. They love them. So, you know, we can go back to cheaper jerseys if you want to, but.
I would say that it is correct, though, that we probably do need to do some serious looking at, can we get that quality jersey at a volume discount? With that vendor understanding, you're gonna get our entire season portfolio for the town of Selma. And if you give us a certain discount, we'll be with you next 3 years, that type of thing. So we'll start looking into that staff side, and then Parks and Rec, as you are poking around as well, see what you find. And let's really get some economy of scale. I think that'd be great. All right.
We could do a,
Yes.
We had talked multiple times. We're trying to push the program to where we know instead of not having sport until 2 months before it happens. Just doesn't do it for us.
Yeah.
I think what we want to see is a lot of these problems with sun wash as we get to where we
The next step for us is putting together a calendar and having it in the calendar. This is the date that this information needs to be set for this sport. And we'll go from there. Councilwoman Wheeler, I'm sorry.
no, that's just it, you know, things like procuring uniforms and whatnot. Now that some of these things are smoothing out, not 100%, but we're on our way now. You know, when you can procure that for, you know, a year's contract, that's gonna be great. And I think we're on our way.
we'll see those benefits if we have to talk about that. It's gonna help us. They won't know the kids can.
A lot of people use calendars, and a lot of people don't. I've mentioned that for a long time. Mhm.
Work through it.
You don't have to know when our first practice might start.
It's about like football.
Football's first practice, and it's, I don't have a date, it's around August.
It would be it'd be the first or second week in August.
Because what I was thinking is, I want a timeline on us to get back, and we need to have all these policies in place for family discount, scholarships, all that stuff needs to be ironed
Now,
out.
restoration's open.
I know
Yeah,
restoration's
restoration's
open,
obviously
we
open,
can
but,
still
yeah.
add that in and apply it, hopefully to this, so that we don't miss anybody for these fall winter sports.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a hefty July meeting right there. Okay. All right.
They didn't even show up to the first practice. They didn't show up for several first ranked already ordered the jerseys for the kid and for the coach. My husband and I ended up coaching that team. Either one of us were seeing at the end of the registers. And so, you know, the town was out that money, and I'm like, what steps are?
I think we could add something in our policy.
Why don't you get at the end of the season because you coach the season? Because then I think it was the basketball, we had a coach that had an issue like halfway through the season and told me and didn't coach anymore. So that you get a refund at the end of the season and you coach the whole season.
That's a great idea.
Or you get your discount right up front.
Sure. I think so.
It can. That's a great
Yeah,
idea.
that's not a problem. That's something the rec board, when they work their policy out, to
I
give
was
to us.
thinking that, I'm like, oh, God, is the wording gonna fit?
So Ms. Bundy just added another line to your rec board meeting. Fantastic. But if you guys send us the recommendation for how you wanna handle all of that, that's gangbusters. I think that refund is a wonderful idea.
That's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, of course, again, there will be an agreement that goes along with that refund piece. All right, but I guess for now, this fee schedule that we have amended, we need an approval for that, before we get to, what is it, the, end of June?
Yes, sir.
Are we comfortable with the fees that we have on paper?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Be crystal clear, 'cause I'm not.
Yes, sir.
Explain to me, I know you got your red desk, but how are you distinguish between resident and non-resident?
Ah, great question. So in rec,
I mean, there's 2 or 3 ideas that I've thought about that can distinguish that. You got I know a lot of these kids come from single parents. They all, single parents get light bills, okay? Somebody in that family, I hope, has got a license. Now, who's head of the household? And so forth and so on. There's got to be checks and balances out there, because you can't live at 3741 Highway 96 North and be a resident of this town.
so the
And
rec,
there are people that are gonna try it.
the rec desk program actually lists out the actual street and block that counts as in town. And then it'll tell you what streets and blocks outside are not within that area as well. So once you put in an address related to either the driver's license that you're speaking over the utility bill, the rec desk will automatically tell you this person is inside of our town limits. So the computer program has all of our streets. It can even show you what streets are connected to that in-town piece. The thing that had been happening in the past is our staff was manually overriding that software function that told you whether or not they were in town or out of town, and then giving people the in-town rate when they lived out of town by manually overriding that software system, which has been fully set up correctly in that rec desk software. Yes, sir. Thank you.
We have corrected.
Yes, yes, we have put it in place now. What used to happen is people used to be able to come into Parks and Rec and sign up and pay for their kid right there, and the Parks and Rec staff would have the discretion of whether or not to charge them. Now, everybody will have to go to the finance building, where they take that money seriously and make sure it's done properly. Okay?
So the ETJ is not part of it.
Not part of the residents. They do not pay town taxes. Yes. So that, I'm sorry, what was that now? So what we're saying is that when you're paying in-town taxes, you're also subsidizing the facilities that are being used and those basketballs and the other equipment that isn't included in that basic athletic piece that we just talked about. So as a taxpayer, you are subsidizing those pieces because you live in town. Okay. Any other questions before we go further with this fee schedule? Okay. All right, so the amended changes of the fee schedule before you, do I have a motion to approve the fee schedule as we have discussed this evening?
So move.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Just want to throw in, these, keep in mind that we can change these fee schedules anytime.
Yes, sir. That's right, my man. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
We've got ourselves a fee schedule. Thank you. Thank you for all of you that are here to discuss this and really mull through this thing. Again, we're not gonna rush through anything. We're gonna make sure we discuss it to death before we figure it out. All right? Fantastic.
They do know that this is not this year's.
Yeah,
Okay.
so this will not take effect for the sports that are already open, the fall sports. This will take effect for the winter and spring sports when the time comes. Okay? Do we have anything else that we need to touch base on, staff? No closed session?
So, Philip, you might want to consider pickleball on here too, somehow.
Yeah, I think we're kicking around pickleball league. Definitely got to figure that out. Adult league and probably some kids. We have in the camp for pickleball. supposed to have kids too.
Okay,
But, yeah, we're not gonna forget it, cause that's a nice shiny torch here. about
absolutely.
Always.
Yeah, well, with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.